Coast's most accurate forecast from the First Coast News Weather Team, certified by Weather Rate, sponsored by Ace.
Look at that. I'm meteorologist Robert Spetta, and this is...
Hi, I'm meteorologist Lee Southwick.
Yeah, and this is... we're going to be talking about the weather. A little wild winter weather, as you're seeing right here on the First Coast. Not only over the last week where we had, of course, our snowstorm in southeast Georgia, but also we want to look ahead. We got some warmer temperatures in the forecast. We got the La Nina to talk about here, Lee. Boy, there's plenty going on across the First Coast, so it may not be, severe thunderstorms or a hurricane or anything like that.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness. If we had one in January and the February, bad day. I don't think
to put it lightly,
it would be very weird and interesting. But we do have the La Nina in place, so it does mean some wet and warmer conditions. We'll get to that.
Which is also what's weird about the snow, though, that we saw too, and the colder January that we had. So I know that you have coming up a look back on January. I think we should start where we've been so far. And I'm not saying that it wasn't fun. We had a great time in Waycross with the snow, as long as everyone was staying safe. But I'm also, Robert, looking forward to what we have to look forward to, what's ahead as well.
And I'll touch on this really quick, by the way. There's some drone footage I shot over Waycross. Lee and I were up there. Boy, that was an interesting experience. We'll tell you that.
Yeah.
We got about 3 inches of snow, which in any part of the country that is not the First Coast, that's probably a normal day. But here, it's rare. We were watching road graders clear out the roadways.
Do what you got to do. Use what you got to use.
Hey, that's great. They're using the resources that was available to them. But Pensacola saw, 6 inches of snow? Your old stomping grounds.
More than that, actually.
What did New Orleans get?
I believe they got a foot of snow in places, 10 to 12 inches of snow.
Whew.
Crazy. But even seeing that right there that you shot in Waycross, that was wild for us. And it's not to say that, obviously, we know snow can happen in Waycross and across parts of the First Coast. It's just obviously a lot more rare. So this was an exciting time for people, as you can see there, having fun in the snow.
Kiddos were having a great time, and that was a good thing about people that watch these updates here online, as well as streaming on First Coast News Plus, is that a lot of people were informed to the point where we were seeing families show up at the hotel we were staying at and being like, we're here to have fun in the snow. And I'm like, this makes a lot of sense. Instead of planning a vacation to Vermont, you can drive an hour to Waycross and they'll see the footage there, have a nice little snowball fight.
And it was cool to see kids who had never seen snow before experience that for the first time, because as us Floridians know, it is a rare sight. And I will never forget that family that we talked to, Robert, where they drove their son up. I believe they're from Jacksonville Beach. They drove their son up to Waycross so he could see snow. This past December, his grandma flew him to Alaska so he could see snow for the first time, and it did not snow in Alaska while he was there. But here on the First Coast, 3 inches of snow.
We'll take it.
We will.
We'll take it. And the good news, it melted away after a few days. Everybody goes back to school, and it's not like, hurricane damage where there's weeks and weeks on end.
The ice, that was the one not fun part, and a little unfortunate to have ice, and it's dangerous. So the snow's fun, but you and I saw freezing rain, the sleet as well. But yeah, roads started to ice over. Not only here, but we know that the bridges closed in Jacksonville because of ice. So that was a little scary and a little dangerous.
And let's talk about the bridges closing and how cold it got. In fact, let's put the weather graphics up here if we can, because we want to talk about... get past this. All right, right here. The January high temperatures, because on this 22nd, when all this took place, 34 degrees for the high, Lee, in Jacksonville. So what little moisture that did fall from the sky, it froze on contact, and you got, especially on bridges where you have more exposed surfaces, it froze pretty quickly. That 34 degrees, by the way, is the coldest high temperature since the snowstorm in 1989. We're talking about 34 degrees for the high. So extremely chilly out here in Jacksonville, despite, Jacksonville not getting much snow. We did have those freezing temperatures. But, below average all last week. Now we're starting to kind of warm our trend back up. But it does seem like January overall below average here, Lee, which is weird
Definitely.
since we did have the start of the La Nina, right?
Right.
And that typically would mean an above average temperature. We may start getting into that temperature trend here, though, in just a bit.
That's what, it's going to be an average of the season and all of La Nina. And so January might just be an outlier. La Nina isn't a set rule that means it's all going to be warm and dry. So, I think this was just more of an outlier likely with what we're seeing when we look ahead to February. So let's just start with, what's normal for February, Robert?
Just to touch on that too, I have been asked by people, when is the La Nina gonna hit? And I'm
Sorry.
we laugh, but
No, I
from
know,
their
that's-
standpoint, they hear us talking
Right.
about it, and we say, warmer and wetter weather. So, like you just said it a second ago, it's a climatic thing. So it's like, we say that temperatures are rising around the world, climate is changing. It's a very similar thing. It's like saying, when is global warming going to hit my house? And no, this is a general trend, and it actually has to do with sea surface temperatures in the Pacific Ocean. So these things there's a lot going on here. La Nina is not going to hit your house, but it does help influence the weather. So you just mentioned sometimes it's below average, sometimes it's above, but more often than not it will be above. So what's the average for February? 67 to 72 degrees. The low 44 to 48 degrees for our average high and our average low, with rainfall only about 2.8 inches, which February is probably one of our driest months of the year on the First Coast, outside of these few thunderstorms you kind of kicked on by, and maybe occasionally some severe weather. But key thing is that we are starting to get more on that warming trend, not only because, like I mentioned, that La Nina is in place, but also we're kind of getting out of the colder months here. And in fact, this is the CPC, the Climate Prediction Center, saying from the 5th to the 11th, we're expecting warmer than normal temperatures. And we could be even hitting 80 degrees after recording this here on Friday for the first time since November. So yeah, it's got some warming trends going in place here. Lee, I am just showing the jet stream here just to kind of give people an idea that will be lifting towards the north, and thus we're going to be kind of staying on the warmer side of the atmosphere. But talking about the jet stream, can you tell me about the La Nina and why we could see above average temperatures here?
So there's what you're looking at right now on the screen. It's the basic pattern when we talked about how this is more of climatology and like long-term stuff. So usually across parts of the South, including here on the First Coast, you have a dry and warm winter time. So for La Nina, dry and warm environment usually. And then, so you have the jet stream you see there. I like what you did here, Robert, with the Pacific jet, the polar jet. Notice that it's to the north, so it lifts north further. And so that usually does mean that we have drier and warmer, because you need a dip in the jet stream to bring in that more Arctic air mass, polar air masses where it's colder, and you get those weather systems along them too, which is more likely to bring severe weather as well. But when it lifts to the north, usually a bit calmer, drier, and warmer.
And with that recent storm, all of this was a little bit shifted further towards the south. So we had that cool and that wet weather across the southeast. But as I showed you here a second ago with this forecast, so we're looking ahead over the upcoming week, generally this is all lifting towards the north, and you can see the jet stream kind of, that little stream over South Florida, subtropical jet, a little bit different, but the polar front jet, that is going to be more so of a Great Lakes type issue over towards, the Midwest, Northern Rockies, which doesn't mean that we're not going to get a couple shots of cold air, but generally speaking, the jet stream continuing to lift off there towards the north. I want to show this to you here, Lee, though, and kind of throw it in here because tornadoes this time of year, I wouldn't say they occur more often, but they are still a thing we are watching. What was it a year ago? We had those cold core supercells. You remember those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you were working it. You were here on air, and they were these classic supercells over Jacksonville. And one did drop a tornado out near the airport. This is a time of year where you would see stuff like that, where you have a little bit of moisture, but you also have the jet stream dipping down with the cool air kind of mixing in, and you get those very classic looking supercells that might have the hook echoes and stuff like them on it. So it's this time of year where, we could see there's still that chance of some severe weather, not your afternoon local thunderstorms, but more so these cold fronts coming in, right?
Right. And just because you were speaking of La Nina, just to touch on this again, like it's a catch-22 for us because La Nina usually means the jet streams further to the north. We don't have as many of those systems that can spawn tornadoes dipping down into our area. But then we know that it's possible you could pay for it later because it usually means more active hurricane season. So we like La Nina in the winter time because usually since we live here, we want it to be a little bit warmer and drier and we don't have as much of a concern for severe weather. But that is not to say that it's completely out of the question. You just saw there that we still have these averages of some tornadoes. So it is still absolutely possible that you could get severe weather. Just generally speaking, the risk is a bit lower during a La Nina winter.
And what are we looking at here, Lee? So
our front that's on the way.
Yeah. So this culminates to everything we're talking about here. You know, we're talking about the general long term, but this is the more of a near term. Friday night into Saturday morning, we could have a front kick on by. It's going to bring some scattered showers. Might even get a couple little thunderstorms mixed in there. But the key thing is out ahead of it. We could be at the 80 degrees for the first time since late November. You know, we're talking about over 2 months ago. So generally speaking, the temperatures are in this warming trend. We're going to be seeing some much more fair conditions, hopefully, versus, all this cold air we have been seeing.
Yeah, and a bit more, if you notice there too on that 7-day, how we stay in the 70s over the weekend after that front passes. It's not as strong of a front, which is a bit more typical with what we were expecting for this year.
Because the storms we'll be getting in January and December, those fronts come through and it just brings in the freezing air. We're not seeing the freezing air.
Right.
Lee, I think we discussed this earlier, so you probably already know, but what is this?
Put me on the spot here.
I'm putting you on the spot.
Okay.
Well, let's use process of elimination.
Okay. Well, so can I just say off the top of my head, first thing I was thinking about, but I don't think it has anything to do with what we're talking about. So I think the answer is no. You're right off the Space Coast. Makes me think of space launch.
So
but I think you do more of an arc.
So that's one of them. You're right off the Space Coast. So that's one of the things that you can think of. So maybe a launch.
I like this
you have
quiz.
cold weather clouds offshore. So that's those stratocumulus, cold air moving over warmer waters. So from a meteorological standpoint, you're looking at this and you're thinking January, February probably. So let's think late January, but also today's date.
So this was taken today?
It was taken yesterday.
Okay.
39 years ago.
Oh.
Okay, you got it now?
Oh, man, yeah.
All right, so it not a cheerful subject, but it is something that we do want to talk about. So what is it?
Now we were talking about this. Now I was excited. Well, Space Coast, that was on the right trajectory. This is the explosion, unfortunately, isn't it? That was at the moment.
That's the Challenger. So this is what the visible satellite imagery seen after the Challenger went up 39 years ago, which dates me every time this comes around. I was born about a month after this took place, so it always reminds me I'm getting a little bit older. But this is just one of those satellite images that is just so telling,
goosebumps,
right? It is scary stuff. But a lot of things changed at the NASA. The reason why you don't have rocket launches below freezing anymore is because of what happened out here with the cracks and the O-rings that led to this. But definitely a big impact on American history as well as space travel. And I figured pulling that in here because it is an interesting look from space of a disaster that we've seen.
Do you know the temperature that it launched at?
It was below 32 degrees. I think it got down that night to like 28 to 30. So very similar to like what we've seen last week. We had this blast of cold air. And it wasn't just the cold air. There was thawing. So there was some warm weather. And then it got cold the next night, which caused the O-rings around one of the fuel tanks here to compress and go back and forth. And it cracked and leading to what we've seen out there. Space is hard. Yeah. I'll tell you that. It's interesting. But process of elimination here, Lee, you got it.
I love those space launches. So, yay, let's talk about something happy. Here
Okay, on that note, we're going to do a hard swing. Who is this? And I want to give a shout out to Dave Alexander. It kind of went dark on our First Coast News Weather Watchers for a bit. Came back. This is Ollie. Ollie's our unofficial weather dog. We love him. He posts on our Weather Watchers page every day. And just want to say a thanks and a shout out to them for sharing their photos with us.
Look how gorgeous that sunrise is behind him. Now, I think a lot of people waking up early to see these beautiful sunrises. I think another takeaway point as we're talking about how warm it's going to be is that it's still cool in the morning. So if you are an early riser, you are someone who wants to get up early and watch the sunrise, you do need to bundle up a bit, at least long sleeves in the morning with 40s and 50s. But then, of course, don't need it in the afternoon hours.
Well, it is still February. Mm-hmm. Despite getting a little warmer, it is still winter, but it is the First Coast. So hopefully by March and April, we get back into a steady 80s, and then we have tropical season coming up. And Lee,
you brought it down again.
That's what I'm here for. I'm here to bring down the mood. No. But Lee, we were talking about how we want to make this a weekly discussion, right, especially when summer comes and we're talking about the tropics, which is Talking Tropics. So make sure you continue to check back in with us at First Coast News, First Coast News Plus. And we're going to keep you guys posted here. Hopefully we become a source of information on this platform. So if you want to get more info about what's going on around the First Coast, or if you have any specific questions, you can hit us up, and we'll always try our best to answer them. Anything you want to add here, Lee?
Yeah, just to tack on, if you want us to talk about things even nationally, if you have questions about the California fires or anywhere in the world, Robert's the expert on Japan, or really that whole entire side of the world. So we're happy to talk about any of this. We like to do these on Wednesdays, and so we do hope you'll continue to tune back in on Wednesdays with us.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I hope everybody has a great day.